Hello, welcome back. Quick review of the last lesson on credit scores. The trying to figure out how to build credit safely when you first start out. And from last time, we talked about a secured credit card. That is a credit card with a bank that possibly you've already been affiliated with. You would put in what's called a security deposit, typically around $400, give or take. And that would serve as, the bank's protection. And you could charge up to, typically that is the limit of the line of credit, so $400, let's say that's your security deposit. Typically that's the minimum or the maximum that would be allowed to be charged. So for a month. Now, some banks might go over that just because you've had a relationship with them. They might ask for a security deposit of 400 and still give you a credit limit of say 1,000, but that depends on your relationship with that bank. Now, assuming you pay back all the purchases that on that card, pay them back on time, no fees incurred or anything like that, you would get that security deposit back. Okay, so that is not a fee for opening the account. That is just the bank holding on to that in case you don't pay back any of the money you borrow. Okay. Now, what is a credit limit? It's the maximum amount you can charge to that particular line of credit. So if you have a $400 credit limit, you cannot purchase an item on that card for $700. The most you can put on that card is $400. You'd have to find another way to pay the other $300. Okay, so after the secured credit card, this is a possibility, but a dangerous one for people to get into. So, when you go into, say, Kohl's or, Target or something like that, what happens is they'll ask you if you have a store credit card, and you just got to be really careful. They'll tell you too that you're going to save 5 or 10% on your purchase if you sign up for one that day. Depending on how much you spent, that could be a significant savings, but please beware, know what you're getting into. Those credit cards, those store credit cards tend to have an extremely high interest rate on it. We have not discussed interest in this course yet, but we will. And it is a big impact on credit cards. So please be careful of that. Know what you're getting into. It's probably not a good idea to get into that next. Stick with a secured credit card, and maybe that particular bank might upgrade your line of credit to a regular credit card. And then, once you've established some decent credit, then you could open up some, companies that are more well-known, such as Visa, MasterCard, things like that, American Express. But yeah, retail, I have one personally. I have one at Lowe's. Do some home improvements with it, and it does save me a good amount of money. But if you're going to get into those, make sure you know to pay the full amount, not the minimum amount. Right? They'll allow you to pay less than the full amount each month. That's so that you can defer to pay it later. But there is a huge amount of interest on those, so be careful. Okay. Just a quick warning. Yes, I know people that through inexperience and not knowing what they were doing, went to college. All of a sudden these store credit cards were available, and they said yes to them and started charging, but paying the minimum amount. So they get the bill in the mail, and it would say, you got to pay $30. Well, borrowed 100, but they're going to allow you to have a minimum payment of 30. Okay, well, so they would pay the minimum payment. What they were not aware of is whatever the balance remaining on that card is, that starts to rack up interest. So as you charge more items to that card, the balance starts to accumulate and it gets out of hand really quickly. Okay, so this is not an exaggeration. I know a couple of people that got 30 grand in credit card debt right out of college. So be very careful there. A lot of parents will tell their children to never use credit. They're kind of saying that because at the time, just to get them to not fall into the traps that I spoke of up here. Okay. it is a good warning, especially when a person starts to experience the flood of mail coming in with that are credit cards, and um, you know, when they go into a store, they're allowed to open credit cards, things like that. Yes, you should avoid that until you know how to use it responsibly. So to never use it maybe isn't the what they meant. They just don't want you to use it till you know what you're doing. Okay. Now, we learned about piggybacking in the previous lesson. There's a couple forms of it. Um, a parent could decide to put on their child one of their accounts as an authorized user. That happens a lot. It is a little bit dangerous for everybody in a way. Um, it is allowing that child who doesn't really know what they're doing yet to use that credit card because they are an authorized user. So now they could make some big charges that they're not aware of, what they're really doing. Also, what it could do is it could give a credit score to someone that really doesn't have the experience behind them. So, as far as that goes, that's dangerous for everybody that's going to work with this individual. They'll have a credit score that shows that they have good credit habits when they really don't. Now, the best situation for everybody is if the parents are allowing the child to be an authorized user, sit them down and show them, listen, explain to them, this is how we use it. We use it responsibly. We don't purchase anything on it that we can't pay for at the end of the month. It is just to get the rewards. Um, it is just to keep this active and earn credit, earn towards our credit score. So these are all good reasons to use credit and teach the child how to sit down every month and make sure they pay the bill on time and what the impact is on that. Now, that is amazing prep for their real life so that they can know what they're getting into. Now, if the child is not active in the payment process or unaware of what they're getting into, they're just going to get a great credit score out of it, but not really have the experience. So if you're going to put your child on, your credit card as an authorized user, please make sure you're teaching them along the way so that it's, a good user. Okay, the other form of piggybacking that is common is cosigning. It's legal, it's allowed. In fact, with somebody that doesn't have any kind of credit, um, usually it's a person that's 22 years old. They haven't really experienced any credit. They were told to stay away from it, so they did. But now they want to go get their own car, their first car, used car, but they don't have the credit to borrow the money, and they don't have enough money to pay it off outright. So this is where they might ask a parent to help them out, be a cosigner. It is allowed. There's nothing wrong with it. It is dangerous to the parent because what they're basically saying is, yeah, we'll take on this commitment if our child fails to pay it. So it could put the parent in a bad spot if the child doesn't really understand fully what's going on. Okay, what does and does not impact a credit score? A phone bill is not going to impact a credit score positively. Um, the only time that a phone bill might, hurt it, do anything for a credit score is it might hurt it if you decide not to pay the bill and the phone bill or the phone company calls the credit bureau and lets them know that you've defaulted or whatever. The reason it's not a contributor to your credit score is you're technically paying for a service in full each month. You're not borrowing any money. So it's a little different now. I think there's some phones that are put as monthly payments on phone bills now. Okay, so you buy a cell phone for $1,000 now, and they might spread it out over your payment in a way that now becomes a credit bearing account, but it was never intended to be that way. Usually phone bills did not have the phone on them. So it was, hey, pay this service in full at the end of every month. So it's not a loan typically, so there is no impact on credit. All right. So what if you have a car loan in your name? Well, yes, that is definitely going to impact your credit score. If you make the payment that they call for each month on time, that's going to increase your credit score slowly and steadily. All right, this is the new stuff for this session. All that stuff before was what we had gone over last time, but it's good to review it. All right, what are the categories that impact credit score the most? So there's 5 main categories we're going to go over, and I'm not going to get into percentages. I'm just going to tell you what these are. Next session, we'll get into the percentages. So first is credit history. It is basically a record of an individual's loan paying habits. So if you have a credit card, each month you get a bill, and credit history is if there was anything on that credit card that month, did you pay it back on time and make at least the minimum payment? So that's basically what it's a record of. So if you show always paying your all of your credit bearing accounts on time and making at least the minimum payment, your credit history is going to start to get really strong, and your credit score will continue to improve. Okay, now what happens if you're late or fail to pay? Well, first, if you're just a couple days late, that's not going to lower it much. Sometimes it doesn't even get reported. It's supposed to, but yeah, it'll lower your credit score a little bit, and it really depends on how much credit history you have, how much it would lower. All right, if you have a ton of credit history, that's great, and you have one minor ding, it's not going to lower it that much. However, if you start to approach the 10 to 15 day mark, you're really gonna, it's kind of showing, whoa, something's wrong here. And that's gonna lower your credit score a lot. You miss a whole month, that's even bigger. So be aware of that, be aware of what you've agreed to, and make sure you pay your credit, all your credit payments on time. And at least the minimum payment. This is something that's important. So a late payment is hard to make up for as far as credit history is concerned. So one late payment, it might take 24 on-time payments to equalize. So make sure you're really careful and paying attention to that. Okay, credit utilization is a tricky one. This is a relationship between how much of your credit limit you use, how much you use each month relative to the credit limit. So let's say most cards have a lot higher than $1,000 limit, but just for easy numbers, we'll say this credit card has $1,000 limit. If the borrower tends to use $200 a month of charges, okay, and then pays it off, of course, they're at a 20% utilization rate. They've used 20% of their limit. Okay, so how do you calculate it? You do the amount that is used divided by the limit times 100. That gets you your percent. Now, the recommended is keep that under 30%. Now, the reason I have this interval, you use 1% to 30%, to gain any credit history, there has to be at least something charged to that account each month. Now, I'm not saying go out and spend just to spend. What I'm saying is it's not going to improve your credit score if you don't use, if there's nothing charged to an account. All right, it's not going to hurt your credit score, it's just not going to improve it. This idea, remember, is to how do we improve credit? So use under 30% of the limit. All right, let's go back to that $1,000 limit. Let's say you have a $1,000 limit on the account. What we would say is don't ever charge more than $300 in any given month. Okay. Now that seems like, well, why did they give me a $1,000 limit then? That is so that you don't go beyond that. That's your absolute limit, but you shouldn't get near that if you're using credit responsibly. All right. If you're up over 300 out of $1,000, what it looks like to the credit calculating companies is that you are overextended. You're overusing your credit. All right, and you're not able to keep up with your payments. So there it is for that. Anything else? Okay, I kind of covered all that. Oh, this gets into some of the other stuff. Now, each individual account has its own utilization rate. So If you say you have 5 different credit accounts, okay, all with limits of 1,000 each, you do have a $5,000 total limit, but you don't want to put more than 300 on any one of those accounts. So if you put all, let's say you have to borrow 500 and you put it all on one account, it looks like you're using 50% of one of the accounts. Now that will come in as a negative, an overutilization to the credit calculating companies. Even though you're fine, okay, putting it all on one account does make it look like there's an overextension there. So if you have to borrow $500, just make sure you spread it out a little bit more so that not any one of those accounts goes above 30% utilization. Okay. So a suggestion there, put 100 on all 5 accounts and you're at 10% utilization for every single one of them. Okay. Age of accounts is next. Basically, that's the average number of months for all of your credit bearing accounts. So, made a quick example here. Say you've been paying on a car loan for 15 months, a credit card's 6 years old, 72 months, a mortgage you've had for a little over 3 years, an American Express card you opened 2 months ago. So, what you're going to do is you're going to take the number of months, okay, for each of those accounts, add them up and divide by 4. So you got about an average age of accounts of 32 months. Okay, not bad. So that's going to contribute to your score. If your average age of accounts is high, 3 years, just shy of 3 years, is pretty decent. Now, the Amex card you just opened lowered your age of accounts a little bit. It's under the 32 average. It's only 2. So that definitely lowered the average. It's all right. This is a natural fluctuation that we will all experience as far as ages of accounts go. Okay, they can't all be old accounts. You're going to get into some newer credit accounts. You're going to close some other ones. So this is, you just can't control this. There's going to be some that open that are newer. There's going to be some that close that are older. It's always going to be fluctuating. So wouldn't worry too much about it. There is a natural flow for your credit score. Just because it dips a little bit doesn't mean that you can't make up for it elsewhere. All right, new credit is strange. Credit inquiries. When somebody looks into your credit, it indicates to the credit bureau that you are looking to borrow money. So that means, they're getting into something they can't pay for. Could be true, might not be, but they're always on the safe side with what they're betting on. So if, let's say, a car dealership looks into your credit, you have to give them permission. All right, they can't just do it without your permission. But let's say you give them, your permission to inquire about your credit, that is going to lower your credit a little bit because it does look like it's an indicator that you're looking to pay for something that you can't pay for. All right, or we're going to purchase something you can't pay for. So it will lower it. That's okay. I don't want to make it seem like every time your credit score goes down a little bit that it's bad. It is natural for it to go up and down. But let's just use good habits and be aware of what might raise or lower it. All right. So other things. Okay. So a person can inquire about their own credit score at least one time a year without any negative impact. Okay. Now there's companies out there that estimate credit scores fairly well. Okay, Credit Karma, things like that. You can look at an approximation of what your credit score, but if there is a real formal inquiry, such as from a bank or a car dealership, that's going to ding it a little bit. Your average consumer looking at their own credit, they're not going to really take that into consideration much anymore. So not a big deal. Okay. Credit mix. This is interesting. Another tricky one. This is about let's see, different types of accounts. Yes. So that one, there's 2 types. There's revolving. That's kind of an open door where the balance at any point in time could change significantly versus what you have is a fixed or an installment type where that's like your car loan, your house loan. Basically, you have a total loan amount and you're going to spread that out over monthly payments. Now, The difference with installment is you know how much the minimum payment's going to be each month, and it's steady. The minimum payment for each month is the same for installment. For revolving, that could be very different from month to month. One month your minimum payment might be $10, where the next month the minimum payment could be $300. So each month could change significantly in revolving. Okay, so that's your credit cards. Revolving is your credit cards. Installment is like your car loan, fixed, a set amount that you can plan on. All right, some popular questions. When I turn 18, how can I increase my credit score the fastest? Just be careful, stay in compliance with the law, and build it slowly. But start working on it. That secure credit card's a great idea. Oh, and this is the advice. Try to make sure that you're aware of your credit utilization. All right, what I've seen from a lot of people is they'll get a credit card, that secure credit card of $400, and they'll go ahead and they'll charge almost the limit every month. Well, you're actually not doing what's intended there. Okay, you want to improve your credit score, but you're actually not helping it by overutilizing. Remember, if there's a $400 limit, you should not use more than 120, which is 30% of 400. Okay, so the best advice when you first start out is a tank or two of gas every month. That's going to keep you under that utilization rate of 30%. Now, the big difference, folks, is make sure that you don't just make the minimum payment. So let's say I charge, I don't know, $80 to this secure credit card. It's going to call for like $30 is the minimum payment. You don't want to do that with a credit card. What you want to do with a credit card is you want to make the full payment. Okay, so if that full payoff for the month was $80, make it. So for credit cards, what you got to be careful of is don't put any more on the credit card than you can afford to pay right then. Okay, we want to make sure that we're using credit wisely. Okay, you're only using it to improve your score, build your credit score, show that you're responsible with your credit use. It is not just an open plastic way of paying for money or paying for things that it'll never come due. It does come due. And if you're not smart with it, it can really get you into trouble with interest. Okay, so pay the full amount. Credit cards, full amount each month that is owed. Don't just pay the minimum payment. All right, so this talks a little bit about that. Okay, there you go. Now, after a year or two of this, probably a year is enough. What you could then look at is, hey, you've been good with this bank. Do you guys, want to work with me and maybe get an actual credit-bearing account that I don't need that security deposit for with a little bigger limit? Some banks will work with you, and some won't, depending on how you did. You could go to a bigger company such as Visa, MasterCard, Bank of America. They're all good credit cards. They probably have annual fees. Just shop it around. See if you can get a well-known company with low to no annual fees. The monthly fees will really hurt, so make sure there's no monthly fees either. Okay. Same thing. Make sure you're utilizing it under 30% of the limit, and make sure you're paying back the full amount every month. Okay. All right. Let's see. Make a car payment a couple days late. I think we talked about that. I don't know exactly how much it'll drop. It depends on how much credit history you have. Okay. Let's say you're first starting out and you make a late payment. It's going to not drop it that much because your score is low anyway. But it's going to take a long time to overcome bad behavior early on. Okay. So make sure as soon as you start using credit, make sure you're ready to pay it on time and you know what you're getting into. Of course, if you have a really good credit score, say in the upper 700 range, and you don't have a lot of accounts, a late payment's going to crush you. It's going to drop you 40 points or so. So be careful there. The more lines of credit you have, the more resistant your score is to one or two minor dings. Okay. So what if I get a full-time job with a really good salary all of a sudden? Should my credit score go up? Um, I get the logic there, but no, it doesn't. Your credit score is just measuring your tendency of paying back loans on time. There's nothing saying that just because you have the money, you're going to pay back your loans. There's plenty of people that have um, a lot of money and they just don't pay back the credit for whatever reason. They don't pay their loans on time. They just don't part with the money or just kind of forget about it. And then there's other people that make it a high priority even though they don't have as much money. So credit score is about your tendency of paying back loans. How high a priority do you put on your loans? Um, so it doesn't matter what your spending power is, what your ability to pay back is. It's about what your tendency is. Now, if you go for a car loan, a bank will consider, in addition to your credit score, your ability to pay that back. So they'll look at two things. They'll look at your credit score to see if your tendency to pay back is there, and then they'll also look at your earnings to see if your ability to pay back that loan is also in line. So yes, banks will look at both, but the credit bureau does not look at your ability to pay. Okay. Why is asking my parents to be a cosigner for a car loan a bad thing? That's not what I intended to say. It's not bad for them to co-sign for a car loan. It's just risky for them if you don't take it seriously. Okay. So if you don't pay it back, it's on them. Okay. It doesn't just go away. So that's a big risk for a parent. Now, if while you are paying it back, they're supporting you and teaching you along the way, that is the best of both worlds. You kind of have a chaperone through this car loan process. Your parents now have an invested interest in making sure you pay it back. And again, if they're teaching you along the way what interest is and how important on time payments are, this is the best of both worlds for everybody. But yes, it is. Make sure that you appreciate it because it's a big ask for them, to co-sign with you. All right. 11, credit card companies offer to. Oh, yeah, this happens a lot. I get this question a lot. So, credit card companies will offer to increase your credit limits. In fact, we had this a couple years ago in my house. Let's see, American Express, we used to use quite a bit. And our usage, we were trying to get the miles, the rewards, the air miles and all that stuff, the travel miles. So we were using it for groceries. We were using it to pay off quite a bit of things. And our amount we used per month was increasing. So the credit card company, American Express, they came back and they offered to increase our limit quite a bit. And talking to my wife, we said, she said, well, why are they offering this? And I said, well, they see that our spending is increasing. It's not so that we'll spend more and get into trouble. It's actually so that they're helping us keep our utilization rate low enough where we still can improve our credit score. So it's interesting. The credit card company is actually trying to help their customer, where there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that assumes that they're just trying to get us to get into trouble where we can't pay and they get the fees and all that stuff. And that's actually completely the opposite. A credit card company wants a sure thing. They do not want to get into the fees and all that kind of stuff and somebody getting where they can't handle themselves. That's the last thing they want. That's a risk for them that they don't need. They want to help you, but they want you to also be responsible, and they never want you to pay a late fee. It seems like they make more money that way. They don't. When people start getting in over their heads, they actually lose. Now remember, credit card companies are paying for items that you buy on the idea that you're going to pay them back. So it's actually every time that you charge, it's a risk to that credit card company. They don't want somebody charging when they can't handle it. Okay, so yeah, that theory's out. They want you to behave and do well. Okay, so I gave an example here quick, simpler example. So let's say your credit limit is $1,000, but the credit card company notices you're spending about $400 a month. Well, as far as credit score calculating companies are concerned, you're overutilizing. You're at 40% utilization. Now, responsible use is around 30% or less. So what the Visa card might do is offer to increase your limit to 2,000. Well, you've been responsible in paying us back. The utilization rate isn't in your favor, so we'll help you out. All right, we'll raise that limit so that your utilization when you spend $400 is down to 20%. So they've just helped you. They took your utilization from 40% to 20%, which is good for your credit score. And it doesn't hurt them because you've shown responsible spending. And that's just your habits is the 400. So it's really interesting. If a credit card company offers to increase your limits, it's not so that you'll spend more. They're actually trying to help you get your utilization rate proper. So, yep, we went through that. That's good. Let's see. How does each of the categories impact? Okay, so that's for next time. The percent that they are contributing to your score is going to be for next topic. Here they are. Study these. Make sure that you know the 5 that we're going to study in this course. Credit history and credit utilization are the 2 far and away most important ones. These other ones contribute a little bit, but these 2 really take the cake. That's probably, I'm guessing, somewhere about 65-70% of your score is going to come from these 2 right here. So thanks for listening. Hope it was helpful. And please come with some questions for me for next time.